Welcome. We're here at the Rienzi Complex speaking to Mr. Panday. And I want to thank you for being here, Mr. Panday. I know this is the first interview you've given after Sunday's meeting.
My pleasure.
Yes, and as you know, there are many issues that have been raised by the very notion of calling that meeting and as to the consequences of it. One of the things I want to start off by asking is that your political history is most of it, I would say, is based on the idea of removing the PNM at any cost. I think this is what is behind your infamous statements of politics has a morality of its own, or that you would sleep with the devil, because the removal of the PNM drove you for decades as the leader of whatever political entity you were in. Has that goal changed?
No, it has always been secondary, not primary. That is to say, my objective in entering into politics, as you would recall, was what the Workers' and Farmers Party, and it was really to improve the quality of life of people. That has been my objective in entering into politics. Now, moving the PNM was part of that. In order to improve the life of the people, one would have had to move the PNM, which was there for 30 consecutive years, I think it was.
Right. So, I mean, because your critics and the critics of the whole initiative of starting this party will point rightly to history, that whenever a third force comes into play, whether it would have been the COP or the ONR, let's see what other those are the two ones that really had the biggest impact on the elections, have allowed the PNM to, and even in 1991 when the NAR and the UNC were vying in Trinidad, it allowed the PNM to come into power with a minority of votes. Patrick Manning was the first Prime Minister to come with less than 50%, and since then we've had this very tight teetering of 50%. So in terms of people looking strategically at elections who are criticizing you, they have a point. What do you say to that?
What is the point?
The point that they are saying is that the primary object is to move the PNM. And
No,
it's not.
as
your
I said,
point.
that was the second.
Yeah,
Or their
your-
primary.
But now their primary point
Is to move the PNM.
yes, is to move the PNM, and that your
Who is saying that? The opposition, of course.
of course,
Yeah.
opposition forces will be saying that. Many
Yeah.
people who want to remove the PNM are saying,
And replace it by themselves.
correct.
Yes.
Correct. And so your answer to them would be what? Because they're saying this initiative is handing power to PNM on a silver platter. That's what they're saying. And they're pointing to people like Louis Leasing in the audience, Harry Raghunan, I believe his name is, in the audience, and they're saying, oh, this is PNM. And
Okay, first of all, I think the whole political scenario has changed over the years. And that is that for years there have been two racially based monolithic blocks, these two parties, and it was a case of musical chairs, 2-foot musical chair actually, 2-foot musical chairs in the House. I think the population has changed. I think now that the greater majority of people in this country want change. That the two political parties are there and they have their following, of course, but the majority of people, those who stand between them, the majority of young people in particular, who have never been satisfied with the way things are going, I think those people are in the majority, and consequently I think the political scenario is going to be different.
well, I guess this would lead me to another question then. In terms of the UNC being a party that you founded out of
No, the UNC. This UNC is not the party I founded.
This is what I wanted
It
to
only
ask.
has the name.
This is what I wanted to ask. So in terms of well, expand on that. That's what I wanted to ask.
Well, first of all, having taken over the party, they've abandoned all the things the UNC stood for. The first being, as I recall, that agricultural land will not be used for housing.
Right.
And once they got into office, that was one of the first things they did with the farm of a guy who was named Pineapple or what, I forget his name, but it was a pineapple farm.
Yes.
They went ahead with a P&M program of bulldozing that farm and putting houses. So they abandoned that.
Right.
That was abandoning. And that was just one of the basic principles I think they abandoned.
Right.
I think they've abandoned the principle of free and fair elections in the party as well. Because I believe, and that there's widespread belief, that they are all rigged.
Right.
So they've abandoned most of the principles that the founders of the party, Club 88,
Yes.
stood for.
Now, the charge of rigging obviously is a very serious charge, and I mean, I don't know. Do you have evidence of that? I mean, could you
Evidence of what?
of the rigging? Because you
Forget it.
yeah.
It's past. It's there. We
Right.
go forward.
Because you see, I'll tell you what people.
It's quite now. You see,
Mhm.
you can't change yesterday.
Yes.
It's done. And you know what's happening tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's important what you do today.
That's right.
And that is what's happening.
Because so with that of you because what people are saying as well, and what people have been saying a long time, I'm sure you would have heard this, is that you miss the power. You are spiteful because you lost the last election. You have this hatred, and so you are making these unjustified allegations about rigging when you actually really lost, and that you want to undermine the party, and that it is that you have in a sense lost your rationality and will do anything, even if it involves undermining the UNC and putting the PNM in power, just to satisfy your hurt and to get revenge. How do you address that? That is something people say.
I can't. They're free to think.
Right.
That's their impression. It's like the wind. When the wind is blowing, you can't prevent it from blowing, but you can put up a wall to prevent it from knocking you down. So people are free to express these views, and I expect that people who do not want change will make these allegations. Sure, let them make it. It will be a matter for the public to decide whether they want to go forward or they want to stay with that kind of thinking.
Right. Yes. I suppose that the real philosophical difference here is seeing change as removing the PNM or not, or something more or different, because people who see the change and the first object for change as the removal of the PNM will have this criticism about a new venture. And then on the other hand, the thing could be that this is starting something new to change the whole system.
It has nothing to do with the PNM and the so-called UNC and so on. I am convinced that the political system under which we operate fosters and supports the racial division of our society, which is actually dividing our most powerful resource, or human resource, in developing the country. And we got to get rid of that. And to get rid of that, you have to get rid of you have to change the political system. And I've been advocating for constitutional reform. Now, constitutional reform can take place, and has taken place, in two ways. Peacefully, through the existing political system that is in Parliament, or by violence. Now, I hope that it will be done in Trinidad peacefully. And therefore, it means getting into Parliament and using Parliament to change the political system. It has nothing to do with the PNM and UNC and that sort of thing. Nothing to do with that.
Yeah. Well, I want to address another criticism again. I'd like you to address it, because these things are said all the time, and it needs to be put on the table. So, of course, the issue of corruption. People say that you and the Panday clan are corrupt. You've admitted to taking money from Lawrence to pray, and that you have no moral authority to lead anything. This is
The issue of that issue was decided in court. The evidence was in court. It was that an education grant was given, to which he gave to Mr. Manning, and which he also gave to Makandal Daga, and so on. And therefore, it was an education grant, and one of the conditions was that he would demand that they work for the company after they had graduated. So that was it. People could, it was aired in court. It's there. Let them say what they want about what you want. You want me to get involved in that sort of thing? The point is, my detractors and the detractors of anybody who wants change, including this group of young people, what that has to do with me? These are a group of young people. I could have been a crook and a murderer and that sort of. What that has to do with this group of young people who want to go forward? You see, detractors. You have detractors, and they will. You can't prevent the wind from blowing. Even evil wind.
In terms of that, these are young people going forward, and you have decided to support them. That's the way I understand it. How do you see your role in this? Because people see you as the puppet master behind this, that this is a way for you to get back in control, that your daughter is being used as a puppet, and that it is really part of an elaborate.
You want me to answer that?
Please.
Well, how? How do I tell you what people are saying? That's their business. That's their thought.
Right.
Ask me what is mine.
Right. Yes. Well, what is your vision?
And you ask me what's my role.
Yeah. What is your vision and role?
Right now, it is. I would hope that it would be as the advisor, but they will have to ask for it, ask for my advice, and if they ask for it, I'll give it to them. I have realized over the years that unsolicited advice is hardly ever taken. So if they ask for it, I'll give it to them. And that that's the way I hope to support them.
Well, tell me, what do you see as the next steps? How involved are you in this process of moving forward? It appears that you are very close to it, obviously. I mean,
fathers are usually close to their daughters. Not always, what I see happening in the rest of the society. So, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, but what are the next steps that you plan?
The next step will depend upon them.
Right.
If they need my advice in where to go and so on, and I will examine the situation as it is and give them the advice to the best of my ability.
Right. So in terms of, to get back to the whole issue of the spoiler issue, would you say that your assessment of the COP's role in 2007 in allowing Patrick Manning's PNM to get in with a minority of votes, would you say that is applicable in this situation to any new party that you form that might take away votes?
As I say, the political scenario has changed. Even the age structure of the society has changed. There are more younger people who are alienated and so on. And both parties have their supporters. I believe that those in the middle are in the majority. And therefore the political situation is different.
Well, I mean, you have had a very interesting history in the politics of this country, where your political formations, starting with the Workers' and Farmers' Party, were opposed to the two major parties. And it's been a sort of stepwise process, whereas, the Workers' and Farmers' Party did not take off as a party, but it eventually kind of morphed into the ULF through Black Power, I suppose, and you're taking over. And the ULF displaced the DLP, which then became the NAR and eventually took government. And then the same way when Club 88 was formed, it displaced the PNM and then displaced the NAR and then eventually took government. Do you, is this a type of long-term sort of political change?
It is said that the only constant is change. And things are changing, and the political scenario is changing. And what occurred in the past may not necessarily happen in the future, because the political scenario has changed. Had it remained the same, it's only then you could argue in terms of what has happened. I think you probably change the scenario and argue in terms of what can happen given the new scenario, where people are fed up with both the opposition and the government, and they are in the majority.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree. I do believe that most people are fed up of the two main parties and would like to see something different. And the problem is the trust that they would place in the new alternative, and that's always the challenge. But I want to, this is something I've thought about a lot in terms of, new parties and new politics and this sort of thing, and being part of it. But there's also a surprising continuity throughout our political history, which goes beyond the idea that there are two main races. And let's say in the Trinidad situation, it appears to me that what we saw in, let's say, 1981, where you had the ONR, the UNC, the ULF, and the PNM. They represent sort of three major constituencies in Trinidad, right? Not everything, but three powerful poles, let's say. And they were fighting it out in 1981. By the time of the breakup of the NAR, it was almost the same forces again, where the ULF was kind of Club 88, and the ONR was basically the NAR, and the PNM remained the PNM. 2007, it was a bit of the same sort of thing, with the COP kind of taking the ONR role. And now it may be that the UNC has taken the ONR role. The PNM remains PNM, and this movement might be like a Club 88, or almost like the old ULF forces in a new guise. So there appears to be these three forces in Trinidad, because we haven't talked about Tobago yet, because the Tobago dynamic is different, and it always enters in with the DAC and the NAR and the PNM and then other forces as well. So this is much more complicated than a simple two-party system we have in Trinidad, although it coalesces sometimes within two parties, but there are these underlying forces. And with John Humphrey and yourself and some of the older people there, do you see this as a continuation of those forces that go right back to the Workers' and Farmers' Party, and that this is some long historical...
I believe that all present is influenced by the past. And therefore there are elements of things that occur that would have influenced the way things have gone forward. And therefore the fact that this group of young people have decided to come forward is because they feel alienated. And they feel that they can find a way forward for all those people who want change. And there are more than the people who do not want change. This is my view, and it is their view. We shall see whether they are right or wrong.
Yes. Well, as you know, there are heated debates and exchanges about this. This is not going to end now. And as it moves on, we'll see how it goes. But I think that what this is showing is that there is a Panday constituency. I think we can call it a Panday constituency.
Why?
Why I would call it that is because both you and your daughter are leading it, and you represent something historically.
So it might be that constituency, not Panday, the historic circumstances that have led to where these young people are today.
Yeah.
They are totally ignorant, you know. Mm-hmm. The young people are totally ignorant. They have no part in the political decision-making process. They've been totally alienated from the political system. That is what has led to what is happening. But they are encouraged by the fact that things have changed. People's thinking has changed. And the people, a larger section of the population now want change. It is said that people don't vote for parties. They vote against parties. They don't vote for the government, they vote against the government. And we have seen that happen. And that is the feeling in the country. They are against both the government and the opposition. You read the papers, you listen to the radio, people are complaining about both. Therefore, it has to be that they are in the majority. And if this group can lead that group, they can lead it to political victory. And it is the only way they are going to get constitutional reform, which is the key. Neither the ruling party nor the opposition wants constitutional reform. One has said it is a dagger aimed at the heart of the PNM. And the other has had an opportunity to have constitutional reform and mucked it up. For example, in the history of our country, only 3 governments, persons, parties, which have had the power to change the constitution and have constitutional reform. It was Dr. Eric Williams, A.N.R. Robinson, and Kamala Prasad Bisesa.
Correct. Yeah.
And therefore, if constitutional reform is necessary, a group of people who believe in it must get into parliament. And that is what I think the young people are struggling for.
Now, in closing, you've spoken about constitutional reform many times. Can you just outline briefly what your vision for a new constitution of Trinidad would be?
Okay, I tell you what. The problem in Trinidad and Tobago starts with our present constitution. For example, it says that the party that wins the majority in parliament shall form the government. That is, the party, the executive shall control the parliament.
Sure.
So you have the executive here and you have parliament here. And what you have is a situation where the executive is in control of the parliament. If the executive is in control of the parliament, there is no way the parliament is going to keep the government under control. You have to separate them.
Correct.
And the way to separate them is you have to change the constitution to allow for proportional representation so that you can have there represented the widest cross-section of the people based on, not on race, but on economic interests. Right. The farmers will put up their candidates. The youths will put up their candidates. The small businessmen will put up theirs. The medium-sized businessmen. Everybody will put up their candidates, and you'll have a parliament representative of the widest cross-section of the people, but you'll have an executive which is outside of the parliament. That is to say, there's got to be an election for a parliament, and we don't need a Senate. We took that from the British because they had a House of Lords, so that you have a parliament which is representative of the people.
Would you say it's a bit like the Mako Senate that Tapia presented? It sounds a little bit.
Well, whether it is like that or not, if Tapia said that, then they were right. Yeah. So that you have another election. Another election to elect the head of government. We don't need a head of government and a head of state. Why do we need that? So you have a separate election, and that election takes place on the basis of first past the post of the entire. That person, he or she, who is selected as the head of state, head of government, will choose from in his own judgment, her own judgment, from the population whom he believes to be capable of running the government. That is the only way people who are qualified can get into running the government, not under the present system. So that is, you'll have an executive. He will appoint the ministers, but they will be subject to review of a parliament. And that is what the parliament does all the time, reviewing what the government is doing. If they want to appoint a chief justice, executive goes ahead and appoints, but he must come before the parliament for scrutiny. And if the parliament approves of it, fine. And it is that kind of control over the executive that the parliament must have. That is the only way things are going to change in Trinidad.
Well, Mr. Panday, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I wish you luck personally and also your movement. Any movement for political representation and self-representation, I think in a democracy we must support.
What do you wish me luck for? You should be wishing the new group of youngsters luck, not me. I don't need any luck.
Thank you again, Mr. Panday. I appreciate it very much. It's been an enlightening discussion, and I wish you all the best in the future.